left a dead body unwatched. I regret it more than you can imagine. Post-death rituals are sacred, not just for our kin, but for every soul that departs. Few understand why we keep vigil over the dead or why tradition dictates that the body must never be left alone. I didn't understand it either until the night I learned the truth firsthand. A few years ago, I worked as a night watchman at an abandoned factory, long gutted by fire. The place had a reputation. People said it was cursed, haunted by those who perished in the blaze. But my experience with the place was otherwise. It wasn't ghosts that worried me, it was the living. Kids from the neighborhood loved to sneak in, drawn by the thrill of the forbidden. My job was simple: keep them out. My shift started at 8. I would relieve the daytime security guard, check the grounds, ensure everything was locked, and then retire to my shed for a smoke. That night, the air was still, the factory unnervingly silent. Then I heard a scream, muffled, pained, dying. Faint, hurried footsteps echoed through the hollow corridors, vanishing into silence before I could place them. I followed the sound to the storage room, a place where shadows stretched unnaturally long. I knew the door had been shut when I checked the area at the beginning of my shift, but now it stood ajar. As I approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but the corridor behind me remained empty. I stepped inside, and my legs nearly buckled beneath me. There, lying on the cold floor, was a young girl, her clothes soaked in blood. Her tattered, oversized hoodie was stained and riddled with holes. Her frayed jeans, stiff with filth, clung to her frail frame. The kind of wear that spoke of nights spent on the streets, of a life abandoned long before death claimed her. Her lifeless eyes stared at the ceiling. I approached with trembling hands, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The sight of her, so still, so violently lifeless, sent a cold dread curling in my gut. My skin prickled as if unseen eyes were watching. Careful not to step in the spreading pool, I knelt and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her neck was still warm, but she had no pulse. She was gone. I scanned the room. It was empty. Something else caught my eye. The dust on the floor bore more than her tracks. Another set of footprints led away. Someone had been here. Someone had fled. My heart pounded as I backed away and reached for my radio. I left the room, stepping into the hallway where the air felt marginally less oppressive. In the adjacent office, I fumbled with the radio to contact Central Dispatch. "Stay where you are, sir. Officers are en route," the dispatcher ordered. I almost stayed where I was, in the small office next to the storage room. I wanted to keep as much distance as I could between me and the corpse, but something gnawed at me, a weight in my gut, a feeling of dread that told me it wasn't over. I stepped back inside the storage room. The room was empty. The blood remained, congealing into dark rivulets, but the girl was gone. My breath hitched as a chill slithered down my spine. Then a draft brushed my face. The window, which was closed before, was now yawned open, a black void against the night. I looked up and she was there. Perched on the windowsill, her body coiled unnaturally, an eerie distortion of human form. Her limbs jutted at grotesque angles, her elbows bending the wrong way, shoulders unnaturally high as if wrenched upward. Her neck lolled, stretched longer than it should have been, her head tilting, rolling slightly, as though barely attached by sinew. Each slow, deliberate movement made her joints pop wetly, an obscene mimicry of human motion. Her fingers, once delicate, had stretched into unnatural lengths, their joints protruding at odd angles. The nails, which might have once been trimmed, now jutted out like jagged claws, dark and cracked, as if rotted from within. Her head cocked. She grinned, her lips parting far too wide, revealing teeth that were yellow and sharp. "Glad you never thought to guard the corpse," she rasped, her voice a guttural scrape, as if forced through vocal cords not her own. Then she moved. She didn't jump. She didn't climb. She moved. I wanted to run, but my body refused to listen. My breath caught in my throat as she slithered up the wall and onto the ceiling, her movements impossibly fluid. Her limbs bent the wrong way, shifting like a grotesque marionette as she crawled toward me, her back arched like a predator stalking its prey. And then she dropped. Her feet stuck to the ceiling, but the rest of her body lowered toward me, suspended upside down, her twisted face inches from mine. A cold weight settled in my chest, squeezing my lungs, my limbs frozen in place as terror clawed its way through me. Her breath was ice against my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up, to escape the nightmare unraveling before me. The silence stretched. Then a cool breeze brushed my face. I opened my eyes. She was gone. The window stood wide open, the night beyond yawning and empty. My legs buckled and I collapsed onto the floor. That's how they found me, shaking like a leaf in a storm, unfocused. It took the police a couple of days to take my statement because I was too delirious with fear and shock to speak coherently. I couldn't describe the girl. They obviously didn't believe my story. They marked the floor with evidence tape and took samples of the blood. But with no body and no leads, their investigation stalled. They kept me for questioning, but with no body, no weapon, and no trace of the girl, they had nothing to hold me on. In the end, they let me go. The factory was old and devoid of any CCTV cameras. They had little to go on, just the blood on the floor and a security guard whose story didn't fit normal patterns of this world. In the absence of substantial evidence, they had to let me go, though my company wasn't so kind. They fired me, which was fine by me. After what happened, I had no strength to go back to that place. I took my next job as a janitor at a food court. It's a decent job with enough pay to cater to my needs, but most importantly, I'm always surrounded by people. And I never work night shifts. You see, I come from a faith that believes in guarding the dead until their final rituals are complete. We believe the body is made up of 5 elements: sky, air, fire, water, and earth. Our bodies are vessels for the soul to fulfill its destiny. Once the destiny is fulfilled, the soul departs, and we must return the body to where it came from. Cremate the body and spread the ashes into the elements. But until that happens, the body is vulnerable to things that have no destiny to fulfill, no previous karma to atone for. Things that linger between life and death, rejected even by the bad place. Something from that realm was present that night, and when I stepped outside to make the call to dispatch, it found its opportunity. It took the empty vessel. Somewhere out there it still hunts. It spared me last time, perhaps because I gave it exactly what it wanted. An unguarded body. But I fear if our paths cross again, this time I won't be so lucky. When I heard it a second time, I knew it wasn't just a cry, it was a scream. Help! The sound hardly cut through the dusk. I'd just left my friend John's shop after he helped me with an after-hours suit fitting. As I stepped out, the sky was darkening fast. I had parked near the woods and was on my way to the car. I need help. Someone, please. Normally, I'd have ignored it, to tell the truth. Trust wasn't something I handed out easily, especially when it's dark. But tonight, every step felt heavy. What if it were me? Maybe that's why I turned back. Hello? I called out. I stepped into the woods, following a narrow dirt path riddled with rocks. The air smelled of fresh earth. Trees blocked what little light remained, casting orange slashes. Then I saw him, a man barely visible in the shadows. His voice echoed from below. I'm down here. A massive pit lay before me, wider than a car and twice as deep. Its walls were smooth and too steep to climb. No signs of a shovel, just a white duffel bag at the edge, stuffed with old clothes. The man stood at the bottom, sweat and dirt streaking his face. He looked like an old miner from a black and white photo, grime settling in the lines of his skin. Frizzy, shoulder-length brown hair framed bright eyes. Thank God. I thought I was going to spend the night down here, he said, almost to himself. I couldn't place his age, but I guessed he was older than me. I'm Steven. You wouldn't happen to have any water, would you? No, I don't. What are you doing in there? Are you okay? I was walking back to my tent and I fell into this stupid hole. It wasn't even here when I left for the soup kitchen. The duffel bag must have been his. I glanced around. There was no sign of construction. Maybe hunters? But who hunts so close to town? It would take a lot of effort to clear out this amount of dirt in a day. I'll call for help, I said, dialing 000. The fire department would sort this out. No use, Steven said, waving his phone. No signal out here. Dead zone. Then I'll go find help. Wait. Don't leave me here. There's wild animals. Just climb down and give me a boost. I can pull you out after. What? No. What if we both got stuck? Steven's voice wavered. Come on, man. I got some beers. Help me out, and we can toast to getting out of this mess. Something about that made my stomach tighten. It's really not that far. I'll be right back, I said, stepping away. Back on the street, I hesitated. Calling the fire department felt wrong. It was late, and what if they had a real emergency? Instead, I called John. He'd still be closing up, and I knew he had a ladder. The line rang, then clicked. After I explained what happened, silence stretched between us. Stay where you are. Keep me on the phone until I get there, John said. What's with everybody acting weird today? I asked, half joking, half worried. I stayed on the line until I spotted John cutting across the parking lot, carrying a hunting rifle. Jesus, John. What the hell? Show me where you found the hole, he ordered. We walked into the woods. Our phone lights barely showed the ground in front of us. John's rifle stayed raised, scanning every tree and bush. When we reached the pit, John pointed his rifle inside. It was too dark to see the bottom, but after calling out for Steven, we determined he was no longer in the hole. He was just here, I whispered. He said he'd been yelling for hours. There's no way he suddenly decided to just climb out. Along the edge, faint handholds marked the dirt wall. The duffel bag was gone, but the clothes were tossed out. John exhaled sharply. Oh, he was here all right, but he was never stuck. You don't get it. I think he's homeless. He lives out here. He was covered in dirt. The first thing he asked me for was water. John tightened his grip on the rifle. Twice this year, it's happened. The police were getting calls about a man shouting in the woods. They didn't find anyone until a lady jogging with her dog stumbled across an outstuck hand like someone was trying to crawl out of the ground. They found bodies buried in pits just like this one. A cold flush ran across my chest. Fuck, really? Sure, Steven had been a little off, but that didn't mean he was dangerous. Plenty of homeless people set up camps away from prying eyes. Toss away their only set of clean clothes, I thought. I felt like an idiot. Like I'd nearly died because for once I tried to be decent. John drove me home. I spent all night reading online articles about the previous 2 murders and scared myself so bad I didn't sleep a beat. I left work early for the rest of the week, only walking home while the sun was still up. I wanted to forget it ever happened. But now, for the second time tonight, I hear that scream. Help me! And I know deep down it's him. I've been living in this house pretty much all my life. The only time I didn't was the short period that I went to college. I grew up in the house, and when my parents died 10 years ago, they left the house for me to inherit. It was strange at first, walking past all their furniture that they would never use again, and if I'm being honest, it most likely took me more than it should to get rid of some of the stuff. But time marches on, as they say. I got a boyfriend, I then got married to said boyfriend, and we moved in together. Not exactly in that order, but you know what I mean. We have been living in this house together for about 3 years now, as a rough estimate, but then around 2 months ago, something strange started to happen. I came home from work at my usual time and saw a white piece of paper taped to our front door. Curious, I of course took it down to see what it was. After all, it had to be urgent. Anything that wasn't would be put in the mailbox, right? I opened the letter up to see the very well-made handwritten letter, or I guess in this instance a note was more appropriate. Welcome to the neighborhood. That was all it said, confused. I turned the piece of paper around to see if there was anything else on it, but no, that was all. With the letter still in hand, I walked into the house and called out, "Hey honey, anyone come by today?" My husband works from home, so if some new neighbors we had somehow missed wanted our attention, he would have surely heard them knock on the door. No. Why? What's up? Came from the kitchen, and after getting out of my shoes I went in, placing a kiss on his cheek and waving the letter gently. This was taped to our front door. Just wanted to know if you had seen anything. He took the letter from my hand and read it, turning it over in his hand like I had, and simply shook his head. No idea, must be a mistake. I don't think it was meant for us. Which I took as a good enough explanation. After all, there wasn't much else to it, and the whole thing kind of left my mind after that. Then 3 days later, same scenario. I come home from work, letter taped to the door, this time an eviction notice. Even more strange, as I on paper legally own the house. Once more confused, I step into my home and put the letter out in front of my husband, who stares at it for a few seconds and then up at me. "What's this?" He asks, confused, as he picks it up and begins reading through it, brow furrowed. "Tap to our door. Doubt that it's meant for us, but we should still call the number just to make sure we don't run into some legal trouble or something." My tone was clearly tired. It had already not been a great day at work, and this was the last thing I wanted to spend my off time doing. My husband sucked his teeth and nodded softly. "Yeah, that's a good idea. I can take care of it if you want. Trade you for cooking." And that was an offer I was more than happy to take. It didn't take too long. About 40 minutes later, his head popped into the kitchen with a smile. "It's taken care of. They say it's most likely an error on their part, as this hasn't been a rental property in 70 plus years, so we don't need to worry." And so I didn't. Once more, the letters on my door were out of my mind. 4 days pass, and as I pull into my driveway, I can't help but let out an exhausted sigh at the white square hanging on my door. At this point, it was starting to become annoying. I was starting to suspect that someone was treating our front door as a junk mail deposit. Either way, I pulled the letter down and opened it up. It was a written confession, a detailed, handwritten letter of love designated to a man named Henry. My brow furrowed. Neither me nor my husband were named that, and I knew for a fact that none of my neighbors were named that. But the letter seemed too detailed to end up here on accident. This was clearly from a person who knew this man named Henry intimately, someone who had spent a lot of time with them and would surely know this wasn't their address right. And it couldn't be a mail mix-up since it was taped to our door directly. I clicked my tongue lightly as I thought, deciding in the end to just crumple the piece of paper up and throw it out. I was kind of over the whole messages on my door bit, and if I'm being completely honest, work was draining me so much that I wasn't much in the mood for finding whoever this Henry was. I knew in my heart that if I brought this letter to my husband, he would go through hell to find the right owner. He can't help it as a hopeless romantic. I just didn't have the energy. Maybe we would have figured out things earlier if I had just let him see it. The letters just kept happening. Every 2 to 4 days, a new one would be taped to our front door. Most of the handwritten, talking about everything from the weather to a bird they saw. A few of the notes being official-looking mail. Another eviction notice, something about registering to vote, one for a nearby church. But these were all in between the handwritten ones, and at some point I stopped really reading them. I just pulled down the note and then threw it out. Nothing interesting was ever on it, and it wasn't enough of a problem that I cared to catch whoever it was in the act. The few times I did glance at the letters, the handwriting seemed to get more and more shaky, messy. A small part of me wished I could send a letter back to whoever was doing it. My first guess was some poor old woman just looking for friends, but I never made much of an effort. It's why I didn't take much notice when I saw the white square on our front door, at least not till I got closer to it. The rest of the letters had been taped delicately to the front of my door, but this one had a nail driven through it. Someone had nailed into our front door. I grabbed the letter and opened the door. "Why didn't you call me or something?" I yelled into the house as I angrily removed my shoes and stomped into the living room where my husband sat confused with his phone in hand. "About what?" he asked with a tone that matched his facial expression. I waved the letter annoyed in the air. "Someone nailed this to our front door. There's no way you didn't hear that." At that, my husband practically shot up from his seat and with fast steps moved to the front door, opened it, and had a look at the slightly rusty nail that had been driven into the middle of it. "What the fuck?" he said with furrowed brows, eyes drifting over to me. My facial expression changed, pausing, confused like his. As I stared down at the letter, I opened it up, hands slightly shaky at this point as I stared at the words within, my mouth feeling dry at the handwritten note. "You corrupted my Henry." The letters were shaky, written as if someone who was drunk, and tapped to the inside of the letter were two photos, both of me and my husband, one in the kitchen and the second cuddling on the couch. My husband could clearly see the worry on my face and reached out to take the letter from my hand. As he stared at it, I saw his face go pale and he bit his lower lip like he only does when stressed. I swallowed, stared at him, waited for something, anything. After what felt like a million years, he finally looked up at me. His eyes were unfocused. He looked as if he was staring right past me. "Daniel?" he said, his voice shaky, unsure. I nodded. He needed to know that I was listening as I stared at him wide-eyed. "I need you to understand that I love you. I love you with all of my heart. Do you know that?" Once more I nodded. I knew that. I knew that better than anyone. "Good. Listen to me. I need you to drive out of town, throw your phone out of the window somewhere along the way. I need you to withdraw as much money as you can, and I need you to check into the Saltwater Motel, all right? Ask for room 203. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could even get my words out, he stopped me, putting his hand over my mouth as he stared into my eyes with a more intense gaze than he had ever had. "Please, no questions. I will come find you. I promise, please. For me?" I swallowed and then nodded. I didn't know what else to do. He gave me a kiss on the forehead and I left. I got in my car and about 6 hours later I checked into the Saltwater Motel room 203. The only thing I didn't do was get rid of my phone. I need to know that he can call me, that if something happens he can get a hold of me. I hope he knows that I love him too. Maybe that's why I kept it, so I could write this if I never see him again. If something happens to either of us, I hope at least this is enough for someone to know that I love him too. I hope you liked it. If so, be sure to support this video with a like and a comment about what you think about this story. Then don't forget to subscribe so I'll know that you want to see my new videos.